We're ready, Deb.
Okay, before I start the lecture, I have one question for y'all. It's a pop quiz, pass or fail. What is the northern neck of Virginia?
It's the piece of land that is bordered by the Potomac River and the Rappahannock River. From the neck to the bottom. Starting with King George County.
No, not
King George is the gateway.
No.
That's what they say on the sign.
I know, but that's wrong. That's why I'm asking.
Here it goes.
It is.
We're the neck.
The sign says
We are the lower neck.
okay.
We're right at the shoulder blades.
Oh, I was going to say about the boundaries being the two rivers, the Rappahannock and the Potomac. The rivers fork the other side of Fredericksburg, and it breaks into the Rappahannock and the Rapidan. They did a lot of surveying to validate the proprietary and all that stuff.
Right.
And so it went up the Rapidan up to the first font.
The northern neck, and I'm paraphrasing the royal charter from the 1600s when King Charles gave this body of land to his 7 supporters. The northern neck is that body of land that lies between the Potomac and the Rappahannock rivers, goes from the Chesapeake Bay to the headwaters of the two said rivers. It goes all the way today into West by God, Virginia. And it contained over 5,282,000 acres. No, but it goes all the way up past Alexandria and on up Harpers Ferry in Berkeley Springs. That's where the Fairfax Stone is. Okay, the subject of my lecture tonight is on the first organized resistance / protest to Great Britain and the English crown by the American colonists. This resistance / protest predates the Declaration of Independence by 10 years. The Leedstown Resolution. Prior to 1678, Edward Bray had built a brick church, an ordinary, a ferry, and a wall at what was to become Leedstown. It was known as Rappahannock, then Bray's Wall, or Bray's Church. By 1742, it was known as Leeds. And Leeds in England, Leeds Castle, was the home of the Fairfaxes. Bray's Church has been in the following parish: Sittingbourne, which was Rappahannock and Richmond counties until 1732. Hanover Parish, King George County, 1732 to 1778. And finally, Washington Parish, Westmoreland County, after 1778. In May of 1730, by an act of the General Assembly, it was ordered to build tobacco warehouses at Bray's Church. In this act also, warehouses were to be built at Layton's in Essex County and at Martin's on Maddox Creek in Westmoreland County. All 3 were to have the same tobacco inspector. On May the 15th, 1742, by an act of the General Assembly, which was the House of Burgesses and the Council of State, Leedstown was created as a town on 65 acres of land at Bray's Church in King George County, Virginia, on land belonging to Elias Yates, Daniel White, Jonathan Sydenham, Clapper and Richardson, Mary Fishpool, and Ann Edmonds. It was to include the church, walls, and warehouses, and was surveyed by the county surveyor of King George County, Robert Brooke of Brooks Bank in Essex County, Virginia. The trustees for the town were Thomas Lee, Charles Carter, Thomas Turner, Daniel McCarty, Harry Turner, Maximilian Robinson, and Nicholas Smith. The trustees were to lay out the streets and lots. The lots were to be no less than a half an acre. The original owners of the land kept their dwellings, etc., but was incorporated into the town. There was to be 100 lots in the town. A dwelling was to be built within 2 years of purchasing a lot. Each chimney was to be of brick or stone. Unfortunately, this survey of the town cannot be found today. In March of 1761, by an act of the General Assembly, new directors and trustees were appointed for the town. These trustees were Philip Ludwell Lee, John Taylor, Presley Thornton, Richard Henry Lee, Charles Carter Jr. of King George, or of Cleve, Thomas Jett, John Orr, and Thomas Hodge. The ferry here crossed the Rappahannock River through the marsh to Layton's Landing in Essex County, to land that was owned by Sarah Brooks. George Washington crossed here several times. In May of 1763, by an act of the Assembly, John Richards Gentleman was empowered to operate the ferry here. And in this picture, you can see the wharf. The wharf is built right to the edge of the channel. Someone said, how do you know that? Well, I happen to know who helped build the original wharf there, but it's here. And that was my daddy. He built it for H.H. Perry. So you can see how close the channel is to the shore. And the ferry operated until about 1927, when the Downing Bridge was built at Tappahannock, and the Northern Neck finally got connected to the rest of the state. Until then, we were basically on our own. I mean, I have read accounts that people in Richmond County, the Lower Neck, if they wanted to go to Richmond after the trains, they would go to Fredericksburg, cross the river, and catch the train to go to Richmond. Leedstown became a very busy and thriving port. Here, ships from all over the world arrived with goods. Several ships of convicts sent to the colony to be indentured servants landed here. When Robert Councillor Carter III of Nominee Hall ordered a new coach from England, it arrived at Leedstown per Philip Vickers Fiffian, the plantation tutor who kept a diary while he was the tutor at Nominee Hall. One reason that Leedstown was such a thriving port is because the channel of the Rappahannock River is very close to the shore. Among the lot owners here were Daniel McCarty, Robert Larry, James Jones, Robert Baux, William Jordan, Thomas Turner, Joseph Morton, Henry and Ann Drake, and this was the former property of Mary Fishpool, Arthur Spicer, William Brockenberg, Francis Drake, Morning Richardson, Maximilian Robinson, Thomas Douglas, John Richards, Daniel Briscoe, John Dickey, and Thomas Jett. The street names were George, Fairfax, Cumberland, Cambridge, East, Cameron, Frederick, water, and church. Leedstown, or the land, has been in the following counties: York, Northumberland, Lancaster, Old Rappahannock, Richmond, King George, and finally became Westmoreland in 1778. Leedstown was also the home of one of the horse racetracks in Virginia, along with Williamsburg, Yorktown, Gloucester, and Fredericksburg, and other towns. The location of the track is unknown. I'll take questions at the end. The only thing left today of the town of at Leedstown is the foundation of Bray's Church. Here, according to William Shelton, one of the signers, is where the Leedstown Resolution were written and signed. "15 of the paving stones from Bray's Church today are located at the front steps of the Memorial House at George Washington's birthplace National Monument, Westmoreland County, Virginia, where they were placed in 1931 when the Memorial House was built. By 1830, Leedstown had disappeared as a town and was once again farmland, owned by John Pratt Hunkerfoot. He had served in both the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. Today, the site of Leedstown is mostly all farmland, although steamers served this place until the early 1900s. The Stamp Act. In 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, which had been introduced by the British Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Grenville, who was the government's chief financial minister. This act laid a stamp duty on all papers used for legal documents: deeds, marriages, liquor licenses, academic degrees, bills of lading, newspapers, pamphlets, almanac, advertisements, etc. This act met with immediate opposition, as it was a direct taxation without representation, as the colonists had no representative in Parliament. Some of the fees of the Stamp Act charged are legal papers, 3 shillings. An appeal or writ of error, 10 shillings. A diploma, £2. Donation to a school or college, £2. Liquor licenses, £1 to £4 on top of the local licensing fees. A lawyer's license was £10. Newspapers was 1 shilling per sheet. Advertisements in the newspaper, 2 shillings for each issue. Playing cards, 1 shilling per deck. Now, if you've ever heard the saying, "He's not playing with a full deck," he did not pay his stamp tax. So he was playing with a deck that was only 51 cards instead of 52. And dice was 10 shillings per pair. These fees were to be paid in coin or currency of the realm, which in the colonies, there was very little English currency or coins. Patrick Henry gave a speech in the House of Burgesses in 1765 against the Stamp Act, and it is considered to be one of his greatest orations. In it, he argued, Caesar had his Brutus, Charles I, his Cromwell, and George III may profit by thou example. If this be treason, make the most of it. Even the women had thou way of showing thou disapproval of the Stamp Act. They had their teapots. William Pitt, the Earl of Chatham, was instrumental in getting the Stamp Act repealed. And because of this, Charles Wilson Peel painted an allegorical portrait of him and gave it to the gentlemen of Westmoreland County, Virginia. It hangs today in the Westmoreland County Museum. The Leedstown Resolutions. Thomas Ludwell Lee wrote to his brother Richard Henry Lee in an undated letter and proposed that the men to meet in Leedstown on February the 27th, 1766, 260 years ago this past February. It was proposed that those that have swords and pistols should ride with them. After meeting in Leedstown, they would proceed to Hobbs's Hole, present-day Tappahannock, to call on Mr. R., who was Archibald Ritchie. Ritchie had announced at the Richmond County Court that he had a cargo of grain that he was going to use stamped paper. On February the 22nd, 1766, Samuel Washington from Jotank replied to a letter that Richard Henry Lee had written to him on February the 7th, 1766, telling him about Ritchie planning on selling his cargo using stamped paper. Samuel had talked to his neighbors and wrote that they were ready at a moment's notice to assemble and to help prevent such action from taking place. On February the 23rd, 1766, Judge Richard Parker wrote to Richard Henry Lee after he had visited Mr. Belfield, Dr. Nicholas Flood, Colonel Brockenbrough, James Beckwith, Thomas Barnes, Captain Beale, John Beale, Robert Wormley Carter, and Reverend Isaac Gibbon. In this letter, he tells Richard Henry Lee how each of them feel about the situation with Ritchie and in the Stamp Act. Parker makes a comment that I find very interesting. He wrote that he believed, if allowed, even the women would take up arms. The meeting on February the 27th, 1766 at Braes Church in Leedstown was presided over by Judge Richard Parker of the Westmoreland County Court. Richard Henry Lee presented the following resolutions. These resolutions denounce the Stamp Act as a violation of the natural and chartered rights of British America. The signers pledged to resist its execution and bound them to defend each other with their lives and fortunes. And I quote, roused by danger and alarmed at attempts, foreign and domestic, to reduce the people of this country to a state of abject and detestable slavery by destroying that free and happy constitution of government under which they have hitherto lived. We who subscribe this paper have associated and do bind ourselves to each other, to God and our country, by the firmest ties that religion and virtue can frame, most sacredly and punctually to stand by and with our lives and fortunes to support, maintain, and defend each other in the observance and execution of the following articles. First, we declare all due allegiance and obedience to our lawful sovereign, George III, King of Great Britain, and we determine to the utmost of our power to preserve the laws, the peace, and good order of this colony, as far as is consistent with the preservation of our constitutional rights and liberty. Secondly, as we know it to be the birthright privilege of every British subject and the people of Virginia as being such, founded on reason, law, and compact, that he cannot be legally tried but by his peers, that he cannot be taxed but by consent of a parliament in which he is represented by persons chosen by the people, and who themselves pay a part of the tax they impose on others. If therefore any person or persons shall attempt by any action or proceeding to deprive this colony of these fundamental rights, we will immediately regard him or them as the most dangerous enemy of the community. And we will go to any extremity, not only to prevent the success of such attempts, but to stigmatize and punish the offender. Thirdly, as the Stamp Act does not absolutely direct the property of the people to be taken from them without their consent expressed by their representatives, and as in many cases it deprives the British American subject of his right to trial by jury, we do determine at every hazard, and paying no regard to danger or to death, we will exert every faculty to prevent the execution of the Stamp Act in any instance whatsoever within this colony, and every abandoned wretch who shall be so lost to virtue and public good as wickedly to contribute to the introduction or fixture of the Stamp Act in this colony by using stamped paper or by any other means, he will, with the utmost expedition, convince all such prolificates that immediate danger and disgrace shall attend their prostitute purposes. Fourthly, that the last article may most surely and effectually be executed, we engage to each other that whenever it shall be known to any of this association that any person is so conducting himself as to favor the introduction of the Stamp Act, that immediate notice shall be given to as many of the association as possible, and that every individual so informed shall with expedition repair to a place of meeting to be appointed as near the scene of action as may be. Fifthly, each associator shall do his true endeavor to obtain as many signers to this association as he possibly can. Sixthly, if any attempt shall be made on the liberty or property of any associator for any action of thing to be done in consequence of this agreement, we do most solemnly bind ourselves by the sacred engagements above entered into at the risk of our lives and fortunes to restore such associate to his liberty and to protect him in the enjoyment of his property. In testimony of good faith with which we resolve to execute this association, we have this 27th day of February 1766 in Virginia put our hands and seals here too. Now we know this document was signed by 115 patriots. What we do not know is who signed it on February the 27th, 1766. As both the Maryland Gazette, which was where it was first published, and the Virginia Gazette say it was signed by all those present and by great numbers since. The signers of the Leedstown Resolutions were from the Northern Neck and the Middle Peninsula. The counties and number from each are as follows: Westmoreland, 47, King George, 14, Essex, 13, Stafford, 10, Richmond, 9, Northumberland, 7, Caroline, 3, Lancaster, 3, Spotsylvania, which included Fredericksburg, 3, Prince William, 1, Loudoun, 1, and 5 from unknown counties. Among the signers were 2 future signers of the Declaration of Independence and the first 2 senators in the U.S. Congress from Virginia. The next day, on February the 28th, 1766, they left Leedstown and went to Hobbs Hole and paid a visit to Mr. Ritchie. It is said that about 400 men were present at Mr. Ritchie's. He soon decided with some persuasion that he would not use stamped paper to sell his cargo and grain. The tar and feathers he saw may have helped him make up his mind. He brought all of the stamped paper he had out and gave it to the crowd, which was then burnt. After the signing of the resolution, it became known as to what had taken place there. Leedstown became known as the southern cradle of American independence. The original Leedstown Resolutions in Richard Henry Lee's handwriting was given to the Virginia Historical Society in Richmond, Virginia on December the 13th, 1848 by John Young Mason of Washington, D.C. Mason was a legislator, a diplomat, judge, and cabinet member. He died in Paris, France, while serving as the minister to France, but was brought back to Richmond, Virginia, and buried in Hollywood Cemetery. Mason had gotten the Leedstown Resolutions from Dr. Samuel John Carr, who had gotten them from the papers of Henry Black Horse Harry Lee IV and the last Lee owner of Stratford Hall. The Peel portrait and papers pertaining to the Stamp Act had been moved to Stratford Hall from Chantilly after the death of Richard Henry Lee. Through the years, most people have forgotten about the Leedstown Resolution. Excuse me, this is commemoration. But they have been commemorated in the following ways. On May the 9th, 1911, the marble plaque that Mrs. Emily Steelman Fisher of Reedville, Virginia, gave to the General Lafayette Chapter, NSDAR, Atlantic City, New Jersey, was unveiled in the courthouse at Montrose. The marble plaque contains the exact wording of the resolutions and the names of all the signers. In 1987, the Chantilly Chapter NSDAR restored this plaque. In 1940, highway marker J68 was placed at Oak Grove, Virginia. In 1942, the U.S. Navy acquired the Santa Lucia, which had been built in 1933. The U.S. Navy renamed it the USS Leedstown. Its number was CVN 76. An enemy torpedo sank the USS Leedstown on September the 9th, 1942, near Cape Matafo, Algiers. It had been awarded 1 battle star for World War II service. The USS Leedstown II, number APA 56, was commissioned in 1943 with Commander Harold By in command. It served in the Pacific Theater of World War II and was awarded 6 battle stars. It was decommissioned on March the 7th, 1946, and transferred to the Maritime Commission, who sold it in 1947 to the Shepherd SS Company, who renamed it Minuteman. On October the 13th, 1955, the Leedstown Resolution chapter NSDAR was organized with Mrs. J. Herbert Coronet Matter Knight as the organizing region. On June the 10th, 1957, as part of the Jamestown Festival on the Courthouse Green in Montrose, in the morning there was a band concert by the combined high school bands of Richmond, Lancaster, Northumberland, and Westmoreland counties. In the afternoon, there was a pageant with the re-signing of the resolution by descendants of the original sign. The original resolutions were back home for the day and on display in the courthouse, and was guarded by members of the American Legion Post number 252, Montrose, Virginia. Gina, any idea? Uncle John.
Uncle John.
On March the 30th, 1962, the Virginia General Assembly approved the placement of highway marker JT-15 near the former port of Leedstown, Virginia, and it was to be paid for by the State Library Board. On February the 15th, 1966, Delegate Walter Balderson Fiddler sponsored House Joint Resolution number 70 in Virginia's General Assembly, commemorating the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Leedstown Resolution and proclaiming February the 27th, 1966 as Leedstown Day. On February the 25th, 1966, Governor Mills Edwin Godwin Jr. signed the proclamation declaring February the 27th, 1966 as Leedstown Day in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Those present for this signing of this proclamation were James Taylor Robinson, Mrs. John P. Cook, Robert M. Norris, Walter B. Fiddler, and George D. Inge. On February the 27th, 1966, an American flag was flown over the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., and presented to Westmoreland County, Virginia. It then flew on October the 15th, 1966, at Leedstown, Virginia. This flag has been folded in the military manner, placed in a cedar box, and placed in the Westmoreland County Museum. The cedar box was made from a tree from Chantilly, the home of Richard Henry Lee, which was owned by Virginia Weaver Sherman. On October the 15th, 1966, the Westmoreland Board of Supervisors placed a plaque at Leedstown at the site of Braves Church. In 1971, Westmoreland County adopted a seal. Westmoreland County, Virginia is not short on history. At the time of its 1653 establishment, it claimed all of Northern Virginia before being pared down to the neck. Presidents George Washington and James Monroe and U.S. Supreme Court Justice Bushrod Washington were born in the county. In 1766, county residents protested the Stamp Act in the Leedstown Resolution, banning the motto, Architects of the Republic, the seal symbolizes the virtues and accomplishments of the past and the promise of the future of Westmoreland County, including a quill representing the signers of the Leedstown Resolution and the Declaration of Independence, who were sons of Westmoreland. A scroll representing the Leedstown Resolutions adopted and signed in Westmoreland County. Well, they didn't do very good research. The compass used by architects and navigators representing those architects and leaders of the Republic who were sons of Westmoreland. It is also symbolic of the maritime commerce of Westmoreland County. A shock of grain, recognizing the importance of agriculture to the county economy. Oysters, recognizing the significance of the seafood industry. In 1995, Westmoreland County Board of Supervisors named Route 641 Resolutions Road when the county went to a 911 emergency system. On April the 6th, 2003, as part of the 350th anniversary of Westmoreland County, the Chantilly chapter and the Leedstown Resolutions chapter, NSDAR, co-sponsored a reenactment of the signing of the Leedstown Resolutions and a reception. The reenactment was held at the old canning factory in Leedstown, and the reception was held at Ingleside Winery. And here you see Richard Henry Lee. In October of 2005, the Leedstown Resolutions chapter NSDAR celebrated their 50th anniversary by holding their meeting at the DuPont Library at Stratford Hall. Stratford Hall had been the home to 4 signers of the Leedstown Resolution. Their speaker for this occasion was Dal Mallory, who spoke on the Leedstown Resolution. In February 2007, the Virginia General Assembly passed a joint resolution commemorating the Leedstown Resolution. There are mistakes in this resolution. First, they got the name wrong. They called it the Leedstown Resolves. They got the county wrong. That Leedstown was in wrong. They said it was in Westmoreland County. They got Archibald Ritchie's name wrong. They called him Arthur Ritchie. Amen. And I know who did it. Since February 2007, the Northern Neck of Virginia Historical Society has sponsored a commemoration of the Leedstown Resolution in February of every year. And I thank you. Now, is there any questions? Yes, sir.
With the ferry that went across from Leedstown, I've seen different movies and things that show ferries with a cable and they just pull. Did they simply pole across and wait?
I do not know. It just, the legislation just says the ferry. But what I found interesting was when they said it was to go through that marsh. I figured it would have been at one end or the other.
Yeah.
And if you go to Leedstown today, there's 2 places that I know where the last ferry was. That was at the end of Layton's Road, because I have friends that remember it. But at this time, with it going through the marsh, there's 1 of 2 places I think the ferry could have been. One would be close to the church. The other would be just downriver a little bit, and there's a low spot where you can drive just about to the river. So it would have to be, because there's some banks along there, so it'd have to be where you could get down to the river to get on the ferry. Yes.
So with the wharf, did ocean transatlantic ships actually come up the Rappahannock
Yes.
dock there, or?
They went all the way to Fredericksburg.
Okay, but did they actually come up to the wharf? Or
Yes.
Did they
Because the
weigh
channel,
anchor out?
the channel is that close.
Okay,
In the picture with the wall,
yeah.
the end of the wall, if you step off, you're going to be in the channel.
So they would just use the anchors to slow it down so it didn't smash the wharf as they were coming.
You referenced two signers of the resolutions, eventually became signers. Was that obviously Richard Henry Lee? Thomas Leadwell? No, so Francis Lightfoot.
Correct.
Sorry, Thomas Leadwell didn't sign the declaration. The other declaration. Okay, Francis Lightfoot did. And there were two senators, you said. You didn't name them.
Richard Henry Lee
Okay.
and William Grayson,
Okay.
who was from Prince William. Thomas Ludwell Lee was from Stafford County. Where he's buried, we're not sure. Probably in Stafford.
But Francis Lightfoot and Richard Henry both signed the Leedstown.
Oh, yeah. That was 6 Lees that signed the
I
Leedstown.
can tell.
And kin to all of them. Well, to quote Adams, that band of brothers by the name of Lee. Yes, sir.
And for those that don't know, if you want to see the original, you go to the museum, Virginia Museum of History and Culture. You go upstairs to the desk and you ask them to call it up. You fill in a form and give them an ID, and they bring out a folder, and inside there it is.
Oh.
Well, that was great. Thank you. That was very good. You know that. Somebody's told me that before.
Very knowledgeable.
So he's got the facts exactly right. He's ready to go to court. I'm not asking any impertinent questions. He might just have an answer.
Oh, yeah. When it comes to this, I have a copy of the original in this notebook. I've held those original resolutions in my hands. They were a little upset, but
Would you say gloves on?
no,
Oh, that's why they're upset.
no, because they're in Mylar.
Oh,
Before they knew, they put it in Mylar before they knew not to do that. Right. Yes.
Do you have a list of the names from King George?
Yes, I do. King George County, John Blagg, William Bronar, Townsend Dade, Thomas Douglas, Henry Franks, Peter Grant, Joseph Murdoch, John Orr, Maximilian Robinson, John Smith Jr., Lawrence Washington, Samuel Washington, Lewis Willis, and John S. Woodcock. Now, the Lawrence Washington, there is 2 Lawrence Washingtons in King George at the same time. The one that I believe it is Lawrence Digby Washington. And the reason I believe that it's that Lawrence Washington and not the other Lawrence, who was the son of Townsend and Elizabeth Lund Washington, who married Catherine Foote, is Digby Washington lived next door to Joe Tank, where Samuel Washington lived. and with Samuel writing the letter and saying he had talked to his neighbors. So you have to know where, when you're reading letters and everything, you have to know where people lived. Any other questions? Yes.
So tobacco, how much of this area was that, like half the crops were planted back at that time? It was a big cash crop.
90%.
90%. So
Because tobacco was cash.
Yeah.
And that was a part of the problem with the Stamp Act. Is there was no English currency, no coin of the realm per se in the colony. Everything was traded in tobacco. And the law stated that you had to pay these fees in the coin of the realm.
Yeah, I've seen stories that at Boyd's Hole, they actually had 3 tobacco inspectors at one time. I guess they must have moved a lot of tobacco out of Boyd's Hole.
Oh, yeah.
But what were the inspectors doing other than just making sure that the papers were in order?
Oh, no. Jerry Lynn, can you answer that question, dear?
Think of tobacco inspectors as bankers, because they were responsible for ensuring that the tobacco that was being sold on the market, being sent to Europe, was of high quality.
Yeah.
Sometimes what unscrupulous planters would do was to pack some poor grade tobacco, maybe even put some rock sticks, whatever in there to add some weight, and put some really good tobacco on top. And so the tobacco inspectors were appointed by the government, county by county, and their job was to ensure that every leaf of tobacco in every one of those barrels was of high grade. So they kept a very close eye on the tobacco coming in there. They also kept a close eye on the tobacco out in the fields to make sure that poor tobacco was destroyed before it ever got to the inspection stations. So they were literally responsible for the financial health of the county/colony. That was their job.
And the reason I asked Jerry Lynn to answer that question is I know that of her research in the officers and all in Stafford County.
Very good.
It's a small thing. You mentioned the 15 stones have been moved from Leedstown. There's still the Praise Church thing, which is good. There's a marker.
No, there's no marker. You have to know what they are.
Well, this is where I'm trying to get. Why did they take the 15 stones from Leedstown and move them to Wakefield? I mean, sorry,
Because there's still a base of the church there.
Yeah, the foundations is there.
Okay.
Okay. You have to remember I said by 1830, Leedstown was owned by John Pratt Hunkerford? His home was Twyford. Those stones had been moved from the church to Twyford.
Oh, okay. Okay, now the rest.
And Josephine Wheelwright Rust, for those of us partial to the birthplace, she's a very, very important woman. Twyford was her ancestral home. Her mother was a Hunkerford. And Miss Josephine, I laugh and say Miss Josephine begged, borrowed, and stole everything she could for the memorialized.
Okay, all right.
Do you agree, Dwight? With reading the accounts with the restoration and everything. And of course, Westmoreland County Museum benefited from that because a lot of the things that she got that was too new for the memorial house ended up at the museum in Montrose. Anything else?
Yeah.
Ian, I have one other
online in Virginia Beach. But the comments about tobacco were interesting to hear. One of the problems with tobacco back in that time was the low cost. It started off being a fairly good crop to grow for money, but by 1676 in Bacon's Rebellion, the price had fallen so low. There were so many taxes on tobacco that it was just not profitable to grow the tobacco. And a lot of people in those days shifted away from tobacco into other forms of income. Maybe 10 years later, I want to say probably in the 1680s, in Gloucester, and it spread over into New Kent. This may have been a result of Bacon's Rebellion, but there were planters that rose up in a period of about a month. They went out into the fields there and they cut the tobacco plants down as a sign of rebellion because the cost of tobacco had been so low. So those tobacco inspection stations, that's absolutely correct. They were doing everything in their power to protect the price of tobacco.
And tobacco, you may start out having a very profitable tobacco plantation. But after a few years, it was not, because it really did a number on the soil. Now, George Washington realized this. And Washington is one of the early ones that knew to fertilize and recycling. And he used what is called, he called nightshade. And what it was, if you've ever been to Mount Vernon and seen the necessaries, they had a way that they could be cleaned out. And he would take the products from the necessary and put on the fields. Any other questions? Well, yes.
So what got you so interested in the Leedstown Resolutions?
I'm a native of Westmoreland County.
This is his family.
Yes.
This is his
The
family.
Lees, the Sanfords, the Washingtons, the Ashtons, they all are in the Spencers, the Monroes. James Monroe's father was one of the signers. They are all my family, basically. And if you noticed, I called them patriots. And the reason why, NSDAR, which I'm an honorary member of, and you don't find many men that are honorary DAR, but they are, anybody that signed the Leedstown Resolutions is recognized as being a patriot, and you can use him to join the DAR or the SAR or the CAR.
Well, before you.
And I will tell y'all, I do have my notebook of documents on the Leedstown Resolution, on Leedstown, and then if you're interested in the signers, I have a notebook with a brief biography of each of the signers. And for about 20 of them, there's a portrait.
That's great. That's great.
So please come up and take a look, because he also has the framed document.
Yeah.
I want you to have our 250th commemorative ornament and our challenge coin as a small token of our appreciation of you being here tonight. We
Thank
really,
you.
really appreciate it.
So-
Thank you.